The amazing spiritual reality that Paul talks about in chapter 1 has to be worked out in our daily lives with specific people, with specific needs and habits. It has to be worked out with our spouses, with our children, with our parents, with our coworkers. Because if we cannot learn to love and live with these neighbors, we do not love our neighbor. And what Paul reveals through these verses is that we cannot parcel out parts of our lives as spiritual and others as not. Our whole lives are a part of our spiritual formation, our becoming, the working out of our salvation. Now, our households don't look at all like they did in Paul's day. But I think we can still identify structures and relationships where we experience the limitations that feel frustrating or can bring out the worst in us, where it feels like this relationship or this role keeps us from being the kind of people that we want to be. So I just want you to take a minute to think about the everyday relationships in your life. Think about what makes up your household, not just the people who you live with, but also the people who depend on you or on whom you depend, whether relationally or even economically. Now, when I think about this, I think primarily about my children, but I also think about my coworkers, and I think about my ex-husband and his wife with whom I share parenting duties. I think about my parents who are far away, but for whom I share responsibility and who I love and miss. And I think about friends who depend on me and who I depend on for all sorts of support and help. These are not only the primary relationships in my life, they are also the relationships in which a lot of my spiritual formation is happening and has happened, because my worlds collide in these spaces all the time, inviting me to see the ways in which I need to open up new areas of my life to God's grace. I can be a class act for all y'all on a Sunday morning, but when I get home at the end of a day and the kids have not emptied the dishwasher, even though I have asked them so many times, I don't really feel like I have been chosen in the heavenly realms before the beginning of time, and I don't really care that Christ is summing up all things in him. I just want my darn kids to empty the dishwasher. But I also feel like it's in this friction, in this tension, in these relationships where God has given me grace and changed me the most. I am a different person because the collision of these worlds has increased my capacity to receive and give grace and to let all the parts of myself be bathed in grace while I give it to others as well. So, where are you feeling your worlds collide? Is there a relationship in which you feel like your spiritual identity just can't mesh with what's required of you? Maybe it's your marriage or relationship with your children or in relationships at work or with a friend. Maybe you cannot see how Christ could break down the walls of hostility and allow you to live in healthy relationship with those in your household. And Paul is doing something radical as he fills up these patriarchal structures with love, with mutual submission, with sacrifice. And the amazing thing is that as these structures are filled up with these new habits, this begins to change the structures themselves. Over time in the Christian community, marriage is drained of its patriarchal filling. We see the parent-child relationship transformed in the church, and Christians eventually are on the front lines of the fight against slavery. The very structures themselves are transformed or completely collapse as those who are filled by the Spirit do what they are called to do, and God makes all things new. And so, when Christian communities try to use these passages to promote male headship as a way to exercise control in a home setting over their wives and children, or to support a toxic cultural idea of what masculinity looks like and then label it biblical, I want to say that not only is that anti-Paul and anti-scriptural, it is not the way of Jesus. It is not the way of love. Anytime somebody emphasizes power as control over another person or control over a community, that's worshiping a structure, and it needs to be called out and named for what it is: idolatry. You see, Paul instead is calling marriages to be relationships of intimacy, of mutuality, of self-giving love and understanding, and that is an incredibly compelling and winsome view of marriage. And he does this by putting both parties on a level playing field through the call to submit to one another. By doing so, he raises the vulnerable person up while bringing the powerful person down so that they can look one another in the eye and be in mutual relationship. Humans. And it is the same thing with marriage. Two people belong to one another. Instead of two people groups coming together to become a third thing, Jews and Gentiles become the church, two people become a third thing. A man and a woman become a married couple. They become one. And this is a beautiful sign of what Christ does for the church and what God is up to in all of creation. This oneness does not obliterate our two-ness. It does not obliterate who we are as individuals, because if it did do that, then there would be no need for submission. There'd be no need for reconciliation. There would be no need for grace, because I would just be swallowed up in the personalities, desires, and dreams of another person. There would be no mutuality. The difference in the unity is what makes the church beautiful, and it's also what makes marriage beautiful. So, marriage is a metaphor, but also a revealing of the reality that love and care can flourish when there is mutual submission and mutual trust. It shows the new community, the new family that can form when two people become one in Christ. Marriage becomes a real-time example of how Christ is forming a new humanity through reordered relationships, and how Christ is breaking down hostilities between people who would be divided by nationality, culture, beliefs, or gender. And this kind of oneness happens through submission.
Serve. I don't know, but I want to challenge you this week to have your own submission competition where you are competing with yourself to serve others like Jesus has served you, and to submit to one another. Because here's the thing, as you do this, what you're going to find is that you are releasing your power and what you think should be happening, and almost like your kind of rule, like you're giving up a little piece of your kingdom and realizing that life isn't about you, that it's actually about serving God. And then also in this, you're going to start to humanize your enemies. I know that when I have served and submitted to people who I honestly just like didn't like and saw as my enemy, that I began to see them more as human. And I began to humanize them and see them as people that God created. And even in that, I just want to push a little bit more and say, maybe for some of us, it means that if we are pro-COVID rules, whatever, that we start submitting to our anti-COVID rules and anti-masker friends. Meaning that you don't need to put yourself at risk, but that like you start figuring out, how can I serve this person even though I disagree with them politically? And vice versa. If you're someone who's like, this is all crazy nonsense and don't take the vaccine, that you submit to the people who disagree with your opinion and think that this is necessary. And it doesn't mean that you need to like do all the things you need to do, but in a loving way, live out your life in a way to serve them. And I think that will really start to change the way we see one another. And this can expand to all kinds of different things. Maybe you disagree with people on your social media and you start figuring out, how can I serve this one person? And it can roll in all kinds of different ways, but that's why I want you to pick someone that's not like super easy. Because not only will this give you the ability to let go some of the power you think you have and realize that you don't have it, not only will it help you follow Jesus by serving like he served, it will also help you see people the way that Jesus sees people, which are his kids made in his image, who are screw-ups and mess-ups, but who he loves and wants to serve and calls us to serve as well. So as we